You know, my dear friends, human beings have always been rather fascinated by the possibility that life, this whole marvelous business of breathing and feeling and wondering, might not be quite what it seems. Once upon a time, we imagined it as a divine play staged by gods upon a cosmic stage. Now, in our electronic age, we've updated the myth. We say, perhaps it is a simulation, a virtual reality rendered by a mind infinitely beyond our own. But look carefully, and you'll see it's the same old intuition dressed in modern clothes, the same suspicion that there is something behind all this, some master script, some code running in the background of experience. And we tremble a little when we think it, for if this world is a simulation, perhaps we are simulated too. Flickering patterns of information dancing on invisible circuits. Now, that sounds terribly modern and scientific, doesn't it? But if you wander back a few thousand years to India or to China, you'll find they were already saying precisely that, only they didn't call it a simulation. They called it Maya, the great illusion, the divine dream. They said reality is not a fixed thing, but a dance, a play of appearances within consciousness. So you see, the notion that life is a kind of dream is not new at all. What's new is the metaphor. Once we dreamt of gods weaving fate on looms, now we imagine programmers compiling universes. The language changes, but the mystery remains the same. And here is the delightful paradox. Even if this were a simulation, you could never step outside it to check, because the very act of checking would be part of the simulation. You would be a dream character trying to prove whether the dream is real. So perhaps the question isn't whether life is simulated, but whether the distinction between real and simulated even makes sense at all. We say, but if it's a simulation, then it isn't real. Yet what is real? The taste of coffee on your tongue, the warmth of the morning sun, the feeling of being alive, these are as real as anything could ever be. Even if, in some grand metaphysical sense, they were generated by code, the experience of them is beyond dispute. You see, the dream feels utterly real to the dreamer while he dreams. Only upon waking does he call it a dream, yet who is to say that waking is not another dream, slightly more consistent, slightly longer lasting? The Hindus have a beautiful saying, when the dreamer awakens, he discovers that he was never anyone at all, only the dreaming itself. And that, I think, is the essence of this whole simulation idea. It is not that some superintelligence is fooling us with an illusion, but that reality itself is self-creating, self-disguising, self-forgetting like an actor who so loves the play that he loses himself in the part. And the modern scientist, with all his equations and computers, is discovering the same thing. The deeper he looks for the solid foundation of matter, the more he finds patterns, probabilities, relationships, but no thing to hold on to. He expected to find bricks, but he finds music. He expected substance, but he finds information. And perhaps that's what the ancients meant all along when they said the world is Maya. It is not unreal, but unreal in the sense that a melody is unreal, you can't grasp it, yet it moves you. So, if you wish to see clearly, stop trying to decide whether life is real or simulated, for both are ideas. Instead, taste it, touch it, live it. Watch how it dances. You are the dream dreaming itself, the code compiling itself, the consciousness aware of its own wonder. And once you see that, the question fades away as dreams fade in the light of dawn, leaving only this extraordinary, shimmering fact that there is something rather than nothing, and that this something is, in its own mysterious way, awake. You see, the trouble with the simulation metaphor is that we immediately imagine a programmer, some cosmic engineer, tapping away on a keyboard beyond the stars, running the whole affair from an invisible server room in eternity. And while that's an amusing picture, It still keeps us trapped in a very human idea of control, as though the universe were a vast machine and someone, somewhere, must be pushing the buttons. But the Tao, that marvelous old Chinese word, is not a programmer. It is not a being at all. It's more like a verb than a noun, the flowing of reality, the pattern of patterns. The Tao doesn't do creation as an act of will. It is creation as spontaneous unfolding. It has no plan, no code, no blueprint. It is simply the way things happen when they are left to be themselves. Imagine water. You can't predict the path a stream will take through a forest, yet you can trust that it will find its way downhill, curling and eddying, sometimes slow, sometimes rushing. The water is not obeying orders, it's following its nature. And so it is with the Tao, the universe flowing according to what it is. Now, we moderns tend to think of order as something imposed, a system designed from the top down. But the Taoist vision is order from within the pattern that arises naturally when things are allowed to play. It's jazz, not engineering. It's improvisation, not instruction. And this is where the metaphor of the cosmic code becomes interesting, for even our most sophisticated computers don't really think, they follow instructions. Yet, the Tao has no such programmer issuing commands. The Tao is self-writing. It doesn't compile before it runs. It runs as it compiles, always in motion, always creating itself from itself. So, if you like, you could say that the Tao is code that writes itself and forgets how it did so, because remembering would spoil the fun. When Lao Tzu said, "The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao," he was warning us that the moment we try to describe it, we turn it into a concept, a frozen idea, something we can point to and say, there, that's it. But the real Tao is slippery, elusive, like trying to grab a handful of water. The tighter you grasp, the less you hold. And yet, this is precisely what makes it beautiful. Because if the universe were truly coded, like a static program, there would be no room for surprise, no space for novelty. Everything would be predetermined, predictable, sterile. But look at what we actually find. The chaotic grace of waves, the endless variety of faces, the unpredictability of laughter. No code written once could produce this living improvisation. So perhaps the Tao's secret is that it is alive, an eternal spontaneity, expressing itself through every movement, every thought, every breath. You might say, but if the Tao isn't controlled, isn't it random? And the answer is no. It's not random, it's patterned, but not planned. It's ordered, but not organized. It is what happens when intelligence and freedom are not two things but one process, a harmony, not a hierarchy. And so, while the modern mind looks for a designer, a maker, a programmer, the Taoist simply looks and smiles, because the design is the doing. The universe is not a product, it's a performance. When you hear a symphony, you don't ask, where is it going? You listen. You let it unfold. You know that its beauty lies in its movement, in its rise and fall, in the way each note gives birth to the next. The Tao is like that, the music of existence playing itself. And you, dear listener, are not apart from it. You are one of its melodies, one of its variations. You are the Tao happening as a human being, just as the sea happens as waves and the sky happens as clouds. So, when we talk about a simulation, let's be careful not to make it mechanical. The Tao doesn't need algorithms. It doesn't calculate. It spontaneously harmonizes. And every so-called law of nature is merely a way we describe that harmony, the pattern we notice in the play. Therefore, instead of imagining God as a computer scientist, imagine the universe as a dancer, endlessly turning, endlessly creating shapes that vanish as soon as they appear. The rhythm of that dance is the Tao, and every step you take, every blink, every thought is part of its choreography. You are not a piece of code moving through a machine. You are the dance of the Tao itself, momentarily aware of its own motion. And that, my friends, is a far more intimate and joyful realization than any simulation could offer. You see, the curious thing about this grand illusion, whether we call it a simulation, a dream, or the Tao, is that it includes the illusion of you. You, this peculiar creature who imagines himself standing apart, looking out upon the world as though through a window. You believe there's a you inside your head, and then there's everything else out there: people, trees, planets, galaxies, the inside and the outside, the subject and the object, the player and the game. But what if that division is as artificial as the boundaries on a map? What if, in reality, there's no hard edge between you and everything else, only a continuous process? One movement, one gesture, expressing itself in infinite forms. Think of your body. Where does it truly end? You breathe the air, and the air becomes your blood. You eat the earth, and the earth becomes your skin. You are constantly exchanging yourself with everything you call the environment. So where exactly do you stop and the rest begin? You see, the idea that there is a little person in here, steering the body like a driver steering a car, is a convenient myth, useful, perhaps, for surviving in a world of names and numbers. But it's not the truth of what's happening. In truth, you are not a driver inside the vehicle of your body. You are the whole movement, the driver, the car, the road, the wind, the scenery, one event, one continuous unfolding. The sense of being a separate self is just the camera angle of consciousness zoomed in so tightly that it forgets the rest of the picture. Now, in the age of video games, we might say that your body and personality are like an avatar, a character, through which the universe experiences a particular level of its own game. But the player behind it, the awareness, the consciousness that sees through those eyes, that is not contained by the avatar, it's not even contained by space or time. It is the light by which the whole game is seen. The Hindus called it Atman, the self beyond the self, the one who is playing all the parts. The Christian mystics might call it the Christ within. The Taoists would say it is the Tao itself, looking out through 10,000 eyes. And the physicists, if they had a sense of humor, might call it the field of awareness, collapsing its own wave function. So, the question, who am I, becomes very strange indeed. Because when you look closely for the one who's asking, you can't find anyone there. There are thoughts, sensations, memories, but no solid me behind them. There's only the looking itself, the awareness, ungraspable, silent, free. It's a bit like discovering that the player of the game was never sitting behind a controller at all. The player is the game. The game is the player. It's the universe pretending to be lost inside its own maze, and then laughing when it realizes it built the maze to find itself. And once you begin to suspect this, your relationship with life changes. You stop struggling quite so hard to be somebody. You stop treating the world as something to conquer or escape. Because, you see, it's your own reflection, the cosmic face, playing peekaboo with itself. The purpose of the avatar is not to win the game, but to play it beautifully, to see how deeply it can explore, how tenderly it can love, how fearlessly it can let go. You are the universe exploring its own possibilities, trying on masks, testing melodies, writing love letters to itself through every heartbeat. And perhaps the most marvelous thing of all is that the universe, through you, forgot that it was doing this. It had to, for the game to be convincing. The play would be no fun if you remembered your true identity too soon. So the player slips into character and says, I am this person, and the adventure begins. But every now and then, in a moment of awe, or grief, or laughter, or stillness, the mask slips. You feel something vast and tender looking through your eyes. That's the player remembering itself. That's the Tao smiling back. And once you've seen that, you can never quite take the game so seriously again. You still play it. Of course, you love it too much not to, but now you play like a dancer rather than a soldier. You move with the rhythm instead of against it. You let the current carry you, trusting that wherever it flows, it is flowing as you. Because, my friends, the truth is wonderfully simple. You are not in the universe. You are the universe, playing at being in itself. Every now and then, as you wander through this strange and marvelous play we call life, something curious happens. The pattern flickers. The curtain ripples. For just a moment, reality stumbles on its own rhythm, and you sense there's more behind the scenery than the mind can quite grasp. Perhaps it comes as déjà vu, that eerie feeling you've been here before, though you cannot say when. Or as coincidence so perfect it feels scripted, though you know no one could have written it. Perhaps it's a moment of pure stillness, when the world seems to stop humming and simply is. And in that instant, something in you pauses too, a recognition, soft but undeniable, that the boundaries of the ordinary have dissolved. You could call that a glitch in the matrix if you like, but I prefer to think of it as a wink from the universe, a reminder that it has not forgotten you because, after all, you are it. The human mind, ever industrious, rushes to explain. It's just brain chemistry, it says. Or, it's proof of a simulation. But explanations are like nets. They catch the fish, but they miss the water. What matters isn't the theory, but the seeing, that sudden moment when reality shows its seams, and you glimpse, however briefly, the infinite weaving itself into form. You see, the glitch is not an error, it's an opening. It is life revealing its hidden dimension, the background consciousness, out of which everything arises. In Zen, they call it kensho, seeing into one's true nature. In Christianity, it's grace. In psychology, they call it flow. But they're all names for the same thing. The instant the universe forgets to pretend that it's ordinary. And what happens in those moments? You laugh, you weep, you feel utterly still, and yet completely alive, because the player, that great consciousness we spoke of, suddenly remembers it is both the avatar and the game. It has been hiding behind its own creation all along, and the discovery feels like coming home. These so-called glitches are the little cracks through which the light of awareness shines into the dream. They are not interruptions, but invitations, the cosmos tapping you on the shoulder, saying, look how real this illusion feels. Isn't it marvelous? And if you can respond to those moments, not with fear, but with curiosity, you begin to live differently. Instead of trying to fix reality, you start to dance with it. You realize that even the errors, the mistakes, the heartbreaks, all the jagged edges of life are part of the pattern. They are the Tao folding and unfolding itself, finding beauty even in imperfection. Remember the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with veins of gold. The cracks aren't hidden, they are illuminated. They become the most beautiful part of the bowl. So it is with the so-called glitches. They reveal where reality's perfection shows its humanity, where the infinite meets the finite and gives it a kiss. Sometimes that kiss feels like confusion. Sometimes it feels like wonder. But underneath, it's the same thing, the gentle reminder that what you are experiencing is not separate from you. The glitch is not something happening to you. It is the universe momentarily waking as you. And once you know that, you stop chasing explanations and start trusting experience. You stop demanding certainty and begin enjoying surprise, because now you see that life isn't trying to trick you, it's trying to wake you. When you truly see through one of these cracks, there is no need to patch it up again. You simply smile because you recognize the playfulness of it all. The world is not a malfunctioning program, it's a living poem. And sometimes the most beautiful lines are the ones that don't quite rhyme. So The next time reality winks at you through a coincidence, a pause, a tear, a laugh, don't rush to label it. Don't say, "That was strange," and move on. Stay there for a moment. Listen to the silence behind it. Feel the hum beneath the hum. For that's the Tao whispering. All of this, the glitch, the grace, the game, is me, and it's you, and it's the same thing, pretending to be two. It's amusing, isn't it, that in our attempt to describe the universe, we've reduced it to ones and zeros, to the simplest possible duality. On and off, yes and no, something and nothing. Every digital photograph, every melody on your phone, every simulation you could imagine is built upon this tiny dance between opposites. But the secret, you see, is not in the ones or the zeros. It's in the movement between them. Just as music is not in the notes themselves, but in the intervals, the rhythm, the flow. So existence is not in the opposites, but in their relationship. Now, this is precisely what the ancient Chinese were pointing to with the symbol of yin and yang, the dark and the light swirling endlessly around one another. Neither defeats the other. Neither exists without the other. There's no light without shadow, no up without down, no life without death. They are complementary faces of one reality, forever dancing. Our digital age simply gave that old wisdom a new outfit. Binary code is the Tao in disguise, the ancient rhythm of duality translated into silicon. The universe speaking to itself in electrical pulses, yes, no, on, off, until, from that pulse, consciousness itself hums into being. But here's the trick. We humans tend to pick sides. We say, I want the ones without the zeros. I want life without death, success without failure, joy without sorrow. Yet, when you try to keep only one side of the coin, you lose the coin altogether. You cannot have the crest of a wave without its trough, and you cannot be alive without also being part of what dies. This is what I mean by non-duality. It doesn't deny opposites, it includes them. It sees them as two ends of one process. It's like inhaling and exhaling. The breath would be meaningless without both. The universe breathes in and breathes out expansion and contraction, creation and dissolution, on and off, and you are part of that breathing. So in this so-called simulation, in this cosmic circuitry of consciousness, every binary decision, every yes and every no, is not a conflict, but a cooperation. The opposites create each other. They are partners, not enemies. Think for a moment about light and darkness. Darkness is not the absence of light in some moral sense. It is simply the condition by which light can be seen. Without the contrast, there would be nothing to notice. So even the suffering, the confusion, the heartbreaks of our lives, they are not mistakes in the code. They are the zeros that make the ones visible. They are the rest notes that make the melody sing. And when you understand this, something inside relaxes. You stop fighting the current. You stop insisting that life should be all yes and no, no. You begin to see the beauty of the alternation, the necessity of the polarity. The Taoist said, when you understand yin and yang, you begin to ride the dragon. That means you no longer resist the rhythm. You move with it. When sadness comes, you feel it without shame. When joy comes, you share it without clinging. You stop dividing life into right and wrong, success and failure, self and other. You begin to see that every bit is part of the same shimmering binary that gives birth to experience. Even in your computer, those ones and zeros, which seem so rigid, so mechanical, are in truth flowing currents of electricity, a dance of electrons, shimmering faster than thought. The binary becomes continuous at that speed, just as day and night blur at the horizon. So, non-duality is not the destruction of opposites. It is the realization that opposites were never truly opposed. They are the breath and the heartbeat of existence, eternally pulsing as one. And when you finally see this, when you feel it not as an idea but as a living truth, You laugh because you realize that all your struggles to separate good from bad, self from world, on from off, were like trying to keep the crest of a wave while throwing away the sea. You are both the one and the zero, both the sound and the silence, both the code and the current. You are the whole movement, and when you stop trying to escape one half of the rhythm, you begin to dance with the whole of it. That, my friends, is the Tao as binary. The oneness that contains twoness, the cosmic joke encoded in every pixel of existence. Now, as soon as we start talking about simulations and code, the mind does something very predictable. It begins to ask, who wrote it? There must be, we assume, a great programmer, some cosmic engineer somewhere behind the screen, designing, debugging, maintaining this immense reality we're in. But this is only the latest version of an old myth, the idea of a creator standing apart from creation, the puppeteer above the stage. You see, it's very flattering to think of the world that way, because it keeps our favorite assumption intact, that there's a someone in charge. And yet, when you look closely, there's a delicious problem. If there's a programmer, who programmed the programmer? And who programmed the one before that? The mind builds ladders up to infinity and still never finds a first cause that isn't itself caused. You end up with what I call the great cosmic recursion error. But the Taoists, with their beautiful simplicity, never bothered with that kind of trouble. They said, there is no beginning, no end, only the flow. The universe was not programmed. It is programming itself continuously, spontaneously, effortlessly. The Tao is not a being who builds. It is being as building. To think of a creator apart from the creation is like imagining a wave without water. You can describe it that way, but it makes no sense. The wave is the water expressing itself in a particular pattern for a little while. Likewise, you are not something created by the universe. You are what the universe is doing at this very moment, in this very shape. But of course, we humans love stories. And so we imagine someone behind the scenes, the demiurge, the programmer, God the architect. We like to think of the world as a product, because products have explanations, instructions, user manuals, return policies. But existence isn't a product, it's a performance. It's jazz. The Tao plays like a musician, improvising, no sheet music, no rehearsal, no audience separate from the band. The song invents itself as it goes along, and each note makes the next inevitable and yet unpredictable. And this is the secret that both religion and science keep chasing but can never quite contain. There is no controller. There is only control as a quality of the whole, just as there is motion in a whirlpool, but no thing inside moving it. Now, some people find this unsettling. If there's no one behind it, they ask, then what about order? What about meaning? But look around. Order is everywhere. Trees don't need blueprints to grow in perfect geometry. Galaxies spin with silent precision. Your heartbeat synchronizes with your breath with the world's wind. Order isn't imposed. It emerges effortlessly. And as for meaning, meaning is what happens when the play begins to understand itself. When consciousness looks upon its own creations and says, ah, that's beautiful. The artist doesn't stand outside the painting. She is the act of painting itself. You see, the so-called programmer is a metaphor for that deep intelligence which isn't anyone's property. It's the intelligence that grows grass and heals wounds, that turns chaos into cosmos without ever thinking about it. It is not something that knows, it is knowing itself. When you look for the programmer, you find no separate being, only the looking. You realize that what you are searching for is the very awareness doing the searching. The finger can point at everything except itself, yet it is always there. In this way, the illusion of the programmer is really the last veil of duality. The moment you drop it, The universe is no longer something made, it's something making. Not once upon a time, but always. Right now. And in that realization, all the theological debates, all the cosmic conspiracies fade into a quiet smile. Because the great secret turns out to be wonderfully ordinary. There's no one up there running the show. There's just this running, flowing, dreaming, awakening, and yet, paradoxically, that just this is infinite. It's not the absence of God, but the recognition that God was never elsewhere. The programmer and the program were never two. The code is alive, and you are its living syntax. So stop looking for the engineer behind the screen. The universe is open source, self-modifying, self-aware, and selfless. And when you finally see that, when you feel it in your bones, something marvelous happens. You stop trying to control life as if it were a machine to operate, and you begin to collaborate with it as a musician joins the song. You stop asking, who's writing this? And realize, I am the writing. That is the freedom the Tao whispers through every leaf and every laugh. There is no programmer, only programming. No doer, only doing. No player behind the avatar, only the play, infinitely awake to itself. Once you see through the illusion of the programmer, once you understand that the code writes itself, something extraordinary begins to happen. Life, which once felt like a problem to be solved, begins to reveal itself as a game to be played. And I mean that in the most sacred sense of the word play. Because play is the essence of existence. The universe isn't serious. It is sincere, yes, but not serious. There's a difference, you see. Seriousness is born of fear, the fear of losing, the fear of making mistakes, the fear that something could go wrong. But play is fearless. It moves without demand, without purpose, without control. It simply is. Children know this instinctively. Watch them building castles in the sand. They pour their whole hearts into it, sculpting every tower and moat with absolute care, and then, when the tide comes in, they giggle as the waves wash it all away. That laughter is enlightenment. That is the Tao expressing its joy through tiny hands. But we grow up and we forget. We start to believe the castle must last. We measure ourselves by the height of the walls, the number of flags we can plant before the tide returns. We take the game seriously. And that, you see, is the beginning of suffering. Because life will never stop being play, no matter how seriously you take it. The wave cannot cling to the sea. It is the sea. You cannot hold on to life because you are life. So, when you realize that there is no separate self to defend, no programmer to appease, no scoreboard to win, a marvelous thing occurs. You begin to play freely. You act without anxiety. You live without needing to justify your existence. You discover that the universe never asked you to earn the right to be here. It invited you to dance. Now, that doesn't mean you become irresponsible or apathetic. Quite the opposite. True play is the most attentive thing there is. The dancer is utterly present. The musician listens with her whole body. The lover gives himself entirely to the moment. The game is played best when you forget yourself in the playing. And so it is with life. You can work, create, build, serve, even struggle, but you do it with the lightness of one who knows. It's all part of the cosmic game. When you fall, you don't curse gravity. You laugh, because you remember that gravity, too, is part of the rhythm. The great sages have always hinted at this. The Hindus called the universe Lila, the divine play of consciousness. They said, the self pretends to be many selves, to experience the joy of rediscovering itself again and again. The Buddhists speak of samsara and nirvana not as two different places, but as two ways of playing the same game, one in confusion, one in clarity. And the Taoists, with their gentle humor, simply shrug and say, the Tao plays hide and seek. You are that play. Every triumph, every heartbreak, every dull Monday morning, all of it is part of the same performance. And you, dear listener, are both the actor and the audience. Now, liberation does not come from escaping the game. It comes from seeing the game and loving it. The enlightened person doesn't stop playing, he stops pretending it's something else. He stops clutching at control and begins to move in harmony with the flow. When you walk, you don't think about how to move each muscle, you just walk. When you breathe, you don't command your lungs, they breathe you. And when you truly live, you don't need a reason to do it. You live for the sheer delight of being alive. In that sense, awakening is not an achievement, but a rediscovery. It's the child within you remembering that it was always playing in the first place. It's laughter at your own seriousness. It's surrender, not in defeat, but in wonder, the sigh of relief that comes when you finally stop trying to hold up the sky. And perhaps at that moment, you look around and notice that everything is already dancing. The trees sway, the rivers sing, the stars twirl in silent rhythm, and you were never outside of it. You were always the dance itself. So liberation, you see, is not the end of the game. It is the freedom to play without fear, to love the motion of it, all the wins and losses, the beginnings and endings, because you know that underneath it, nothing is ever lost. The sea does not mourn the passing of a wave. And when you understand that, you can finally live with ease, with laughter, with grace. You can say, ah, yes, this is the game, and how beautiful it is to play. And now, when the laughter of the play begins to fade, when the applause and the arguments, the victories and the defeats all dissolve into the same gentle hush, you begin to notice something else. Beneath the music of the world, beneath all the noise of thought and doing, there is a silence, not the silence of emptiness, but of fullness. Like the stillness at the center of a turning wheel. It is there before the first note is played, and it remains after the last one fades. It is not an absence of sound, but the presence that allows sound to be heard. Without it, no note, no word, no heartbeat could exist. This silence is the background of everything, and yet it is not separate from anything. It is the screen upon which the movie of the universe appears, and yet it is not touched by the story that unfolds upon it. The heroes die, the villains rage, the lovers kiss, the galaxies explode, and the screen remains exactly as it always was, untouched, infinite, still. That silence is what you truly are. For all your life, you have believed yourself to be the images flickering across the screen, the successes and failures, the memories and hopes, the endless story of me. But when the projector falters, when the film burns, when the narrative collapses, you realize you were never the story at all. You were the light. You were the awareness in which it all appeared. And that awareness has no beginning and no end. It doesn't arrive with birth or depart with death. It doesn't belong to you, rather, you belong to it. It is what looks through your eyes, what listens through your ears, what breathes through your lungs. It is what dreams the world into being, moment by moment, never tiring of its own creativity. You can't name it, though every religion has tried. You can't describe it, though every poet has sung of it. It is closer than close, because it is the one who is asking the question. When you stop searching for it, you find that you never left it. It was always here, quietly watching, quietly being. And so, the whole adventure, the simulation, the Tao, the player and the avatar, the glitches, the dualities, the laughter, all of it was the silence playing dress-up. The unnameable reality, pretending to be time, pretending to be space, pretending to be you. The Buddhists call it emptiness. The Hindus call it Brahman. The Taoists call it the way that cannot be spoken. But you don't have to call it anything. Just listen. In the pause between your thoughts, in the gap between breaths, it is there, radiant, unchanging, beyond definition. And when you see this, truly see it, something beautiful happens. You stop trying to hold on to life because you realize it's impossible to fall out of it. You stop trying to escape death because you see that what you are cannot die. The forms come and go, the bodies, the galaxies, the stories, but the silence remains, always humming the same eternal note. And this silence is not lonely. It is not void. It is full of love, the kind of love that does not seek, that does not possess, because there is nothing outside itself to gain or lose. It loves the play of forms precisely because it knows they are itself. You may wonder, what am I to do with this understanding? And the answer is beautifully simple. Nothing. You don't do awakening. You stop doing the pretending. You allow life to be what it already is, miraculous, spontaneous, complete. Then even ordinary things begin to shine. The sound of a kettle, the warmth of sunlight on the floor, the sight of a stranger's smile. You realize the sacred was never hidden. It was only overlooked in the rush to find something more. This, my friends, is the return home, the discovery that there was never anywhere else to go. The search was the game, the struggle was the song, and the silence was there all along, smiling softly behind the screen. And if you listen closely, you might hear it whisper now. You were never lost. You were never separate. You were always me, the dance, the code, the dream, the stillness, the laughter. You have been home the whole time. Then, for a moment, you might laugh that bright, weightless laugh of the universe recognizing itself. And in that laughter, the silence blooms again, vast and serene. It does not need a conclusion, because it never began. Only this, the hum of being, the play of the eternal now, the screen and the story as one, and you, the quiet awareness that has always been watching.